comes time to start working on the back of the car, we're going to get this trunk out of the way, get this removed just so we can see everything. This is what we're replacing, so we're basically going to start off by finding all the spot welds in all the areas that it's attached. It's a good reference to look at that first. We got spot welds here, around the corner here, and basically around the frame rails and along the bottom here. We'll get rid of some of the sound deadening and all of the crazy stuff that they put on the floors, the seam sealer and all that stuff, just so we can reveal what we're actually working on, and it's a lot easier to split. Probably going to crawl underneath and get the bottom side too, which is a pain in the butt, but at the end of the day it's really not that hard. But yeah, that's where we start. So we'll find all the spot welds first and then figure out the best approach on how to tackle each of those. Alright, to find all these spot welds, I usually just put a wire brush on the end of a drill. It's kind of a safe way to figure out where all of these things are. Cuts are pretty quick without really damaging anything around it. Basically, the only goal is to find out exactly where they are so you can kind of figure out what approach on what side we're going to start cutting them out at. So pretty straightforward. Find all the spot welds and just start drilling. Alright, so there's multiple ways to tackle spot welds, and it all depends on each specific car based on the layering of the panels. So, for example, this is a complete full rear body panel, and this looks like it's layered on top. So basically, there's two ways to go about doing it. This is your traditional spot weld cutter, where you would use a punch, center of the hole, and use a spot weld. Where you would use this if you're trying to save this panel. You want a clean hole here. You don't want some massive hole to release that panel. However, since this is on the outside, we're going to use a belt sander. It's a little bit more aggressive. It creates a huge hole, but it's a hell of a lot faster. And you still have to be careful because you don't want to really get too deep underneath because you want to save what's under it. Because we don't want to damage, all these flanges here and all these connecting points. But we're going to use this on the outside. There are scenarios where this is definitely the better option. It can be quick. I don't like it because these teeth get all gouged up. They start breaking off and then they start walking all over the place. I use this when I can, but every situation is a little bit different, especially when you get inside the car and doing rust repair. Like, you got to know and pay attention to which layers you're working on and what's the best approach. And when it comes to getting the new pieces along that rear cowl there, we will take this approach because we want to save the existing panel, and we will use this one on the one that's on the car, if that makes sense. So I'm going to get after it with this one and kind of show you what we're talking about. Alright, so I've located all the spot welds and gotten rid of all of them, ground them down so you can just see through them. I'd say about 99%. There are a couple under here on the inside that I'm going to have to get. That's going to be really difficult to show. But outside of that, before I want to kind of rip this thing out of here, it's not a bad idea to take a couple of measurements, especially kind of where this striker is. So you just kind of go off the back wall. Looks like we've got 21 1/4 right about there. Just write it somewhere, just so you've got a little bit of a reference point. So, and you put a new one on, and if it's way off, you're not running into any problems down the line. There's the rear body panel fully removed. Not too bad. Pretty easy when you can find all the spot welds. All this gold stuff, it's softer than metal, so you can usually use a chisel and just kind of hammer through it. But yeah, that's what it takes. don't forget these little corners. It is a little weird up there. And then these are the two spot welds that I found that are kind of tucked in from the inside. All right, up next we're going to come in and get all of these flanges where all these spot welds are going to be all cleaned up, and we're going to hammer and dolly them nice and straight so we've got nice mating surface for putting the new rear body on. Make sure you get rid of all of the seam sealer and all of the junk, because this is a seam that we want to be as clean as possible. And then before we weld it, we will actually epoxy the entire thing and then do little spots of grinding where we plan to weld, just to make sure everything is good to go for absolute longevity, and these things are never a problem in the future. All right, first problem spot that I found is this little section here is very rust pitted. There is a couple pinholes, so this is unexpected, but of course everything is fixable, so we are going to have to kind of see how it cleans up with the grinder, maybe depending on what we have as spare stuff. You know, maybe I've got a chunk that's similar to that, or we can make our own, or we can do something, so we'll see. After grinding out as much as possible and doing a little spot blasting, I did get a bigger hole, and then this edge here got pretty thin, so we're gonna have to make one. Unfortunately, it's kind of a weird piece, but I do think we can do it with what we've got here, so let's see what we can come up with. Alright, so this piece is curved this way, and it's got a nice little bead right down the center. I do have a bead roller here. We're going to give that a shot before we start doing anything crazy with hammer and dollying. So basically this is my bead line that I'm going to do my absolute best to try and keep as straight as possible. We're going to start out light and then make our way and get some depth. Not terrible. Let's give it a quick check. It is close. Alright, we're going to crank this down just a touch. All right, so this is what I got for this piece right here. This is really close to the curve of that piece. So we're gonna try and knock that thing around this. A little bit more. Getting close. All right, we're going to trim this back edge just so it might be a little bit easier to form. All right, that looks good right about there. We need this a nice tight bend up high. That's close, guys. All right, so here we are with this piece. I thought maybe it was in my best interest to try to make this line curve to kind of match the curvature of here. It wasn't perfect. Maybe I should have just done a straight one and then hit it with the shrinker anyway, because I think that's what's going to have to happen here. So it's really close, but as you can see, it does need a little bit of adjustment. So we're going to start shrinking it like right in here and see if we can get it to come up like that. Honestly, that might be all that was needed. Oh, that's so close. We need to open this up a little bit. Maybe one or two more shrinks, but not much. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. It doesn't get a whole lot better. That's a weird spot. All right, I'm gonna very gently rework this spot a little bit. All right, here's a little bit of the reasoning behind what we are doing here. So there was a hole right here, and based on the fact that there's a hole on that seam, I'm willing to bet that behind it there's going to be rust on this flange. So the idea is to cut the entire thing so we can actually get access to that back flange, get that coated in epoxy before we weld this on. And then I'm going to make a cut right underneath just because it's going to be a nice easy weld right here. And then also to have a cut on this side deep enough that we'll be able to get in here with some epoxy and get that sealed up. So both sides will be easy access to. We can hammer and dolly as necessary. Nothing's hidden, which is a blessing on some of these cars. But yeah, that's the reasoning behind the piece that you're looking at. All right, got those cut out. A little bit of rust back there. Not terrible though. Probably be pretty easy to clean. All right, here's the final on this piece that we made. You know what? For such an awkward piece, that fits really good. That is a tough line to make, but I like this a lot. Sweet. we got that piece welded on. It's looking really pretty. Looks like we got fantastic penetration on the backside, and should be really easy to get some material back there and protect both sides. This is gonna look really nice.